Pip pip tally ho, Joolz Guides here, in which I wander around London with a ridiculous moustache, and we're still a bit restricted, so it's going to be a bit of a quick one today. But because it's almost exactly 200 years since the birth of Florence Nightingale, I thought we'd start here by Florence Nightingale's statue, because nurses are very much in the news at the moment. Florence Nightingale became famous during the Crimean War, and when she was there, she developed this reputation as being the Lady of the Lamp, which became quite iconic. She would sort of walk through the rows of injured soldiers with a lamp, and they say that every poor fellow's face softened with gratitude at the sight of her. Actually, I think the statue of her is made out of cannons seized at the siege of Sebastopol. She increased the reputation of nurses. She even opened the first nursing hospital at St. Thomas's Hospital. Now this, by the way, we've already talked about this because behind you there is the Grand Old Duke of York's column. He's the second son of King George III, about whom more later. But we've already discussed this in another film, and these of course were the clubs that the Duke of Wellington was a member of. This is now the Institute of Directors, but it used to be called the United Service Club. Anyway, this isn't the one from which the Duke of Wellington was ejected for wearing trousers. That was actually Almanacs, which is just over there. I don't think that still exists. But you had to wear breeches in those days, and he favoured the trouser. But the lady on the door, because they had women on the door there, they refused him.
Today I've been busy removing, and I'm all of a fidgety fidge. My elastics were on the
You see these statues everywhere and people just ignore it, but he's one of the most important kings in English history.
Yeah, and he's kind of hidden, isn't he? Because he's right in the centre of this sort of...
Now, Florence Nightingale was born 200 years ago, but King George III, he died 200 years ago, because he's always called the Mad King. But really, he wasn't really all that mad. I mean, unfortunately, he had something called porphyria. He was quite a good king. He oversaw great advancements in exploration, scientific discovery, the agricultural and industrial revolutions. Uranus was discovered. Whilst he was on the throne, he ordered the expeditions by Captain Cook to the South Pacific, and he also lost the colonies to America whilst they got the Second Amendment. And he reigned for 59 years, which is a pretty long reign in those days. When they made that film, The Madness of King George, they were originally going to call it The Madness of King George III, Madness of King George III, but they couldn't call it that because apparently in America people would have wondered what happened to parts 1 and 2. So I'm not making that up. Don't take any notice of those people who tell you that the amount of feet which are the horse's hooves which are off the ground have something to do with how he died. It's absolute poppycock. Some people say he died in battle if he had 2 feet off the ground or some nonsense. It's not true, it's bollocks. I've got a friend who lives there. People wonder if anyone actually lives in central London. But my friend, he actually lives up there. So cool. I always think whenever Tom Carradine sings that song, I live in Trafalgar Square with 4 lions to guard me, I always think of my friend who lives up there. Such an excellent address.
Everybody else is... come on, no one lives in Trafalgar Square. What do you want to know?
Yeah, exactly. It's like a lie, you know. Imagine if you get arrested by the police and they say, what's your address? Yeah, Trafalgar Square. Yeah, all right, likely story, son. Yeah, exactly. And if your name happened to be Nelson, my neighbour, my next door neighbour is called Horatio as well. Imagine if he lived in Trafalgar Square. Now look, we've done Trafalgar Square in other videos, so I'm not going to talk about that really in general. But as we're passing through, might as well mention a couple of things. That's St. Martin in the Fields, that church. There's been a church there since 1222. Not that particular one. It's actually the parish church of the Queen and the Prime Minister, in that Downing Street and Buckingham Palace both lie within the ancient parish of St. Martin in the Fields. These days you can go and have a cup of tea in the cafe in the crypt, amongst all the tombs, if you're into that. The famous people to be buried there are Nell Gwyn, the favourite mistress of King Charles II, and also Robert Boyle, who did Boyle's Law. Did you watch that video that I sent you from Alexi Sale?
I haven't yet.
People say to me, Joolzy, oh Joolzy, just what is Boyle's Law for the expansion of gases? Well, Boyle's Law states that for any fixed mass of gas at a constant temperature, the volume will also remain constant. That's right. So that's Robert Boyle, he's buried in that church. As if you get... I bet you Alexi Sale cares though. Alexi Sale was brilliant.
I live in Trafalgar Square with 4 lions to guard me.
So yeah, the reason it's called St. Martin in the Fields is because it was literally in the fields. So the Strand was the main processional route from the City of London to the City of Westminster. This was just an old hamlet, actually, called the hamlet of Charing, or Charing in Old English. So that's after which we get Charing Cross. Charing meant the bend in the river in Old English.
Oh, it's a trifle drafty, but I look at it this way, you see. If it's good enough for Nelson, it's quite good enough.
We could do about an hour talking about Trafalgar Square, but anyway, there was something I forgot, and it's this thing over there on the wall. A lot of people just walk past it and ignore it, but since medieval times, they'd had these things called tally sticks in the Houses of Parliament, which look kind of like paddles, and they were used by officials of the Exchequer to record money that had been paid to the king and stuff like that. They had loads of these wooden sticks. Eventually they started writing these things onto bits of paper, and they said to some guy, oh look, can you just burn these things? We don't need these sticks anymore, we've got paper. So this bloke went off and burnt them in the furnace there. He ended up burning down the whole of the Houses of Parliament in the 1800s sometime. The only thing that survives is the Great Hall there now. But anyway, one of the things that they lost was the standards of imperial measurements that showed everybody exactly how big a foot is or how big a yard is. And so instead they've now recorded them forever over there against the wall. So now everyone can see just exactly how much a foot is and how much a yard is. And over there is Drummond's. Now that's at Drummond's is a Messrs Drummond's, who were the bankers of King George III. I was talking about the Grand Old Duke of York earlier on. Up on his column there, the son of King George III. He had a mistress, like all these people had mistresses in those days, and one of them was called Mary Ann Clark, and he dumped her. So to get her revenge, she wrote her memoirs, including sordid details of their sex life and the fact that she had been selling commissions for the British Army with his full knowledge. So he knew about it. You could pay and say, oh, here's 10 quid, can I be a colonel, please? And this was illegal, of course, and he was so terrified of the publicity that he bought all 16,000 copies of her book and he burnt them over in Salisbury Square. But the publishers said, since you now own the copyright, you might as well keep a copy at Messrs Drummond's of Charing Cross. So presumably somewhere in the vaults there at Drummond's there is one copy of this really juicy memoir, which probably would be worth loads of money. I don't know if they've still got it, but I like to think that they do. Goose-stepping morons like yourself should try reading books instead of burning them. Okay, Nelson's column, yes. Lions by Edward Landseer, yes. When they dragged the lion, I think it was from London Zoo, to his studio to carve this, the carcass started to go a bit rotten, and before he could actually finish, the paws had been completely decayed. So he ended up modelling the paws on his pet cat. So apparently they say he has cat's feet, but the only difference really is the scale. I mean, they're more or less the same, aren't they?
Let's all go down the Strand. Let's all go down the Strand.
Now, Simon, do you know what this street is called? No, don't look, don't cheat.
Cumberland?
No, it's Northumberland Avenue. So I bet you when you played Monopoly, you probably wondered, oh, Northumberland Avenue, where's that? This is Northumberland Avenue. It just leads from off Trafalgar Square down towards the embankment, which I know I went to in another video recently, but we're turning left.
Speaking of Monopoly, so you know I make toys sometimes.
Yeah.
Well, in the new Monopoly, the official Monopoly set, there's a penguin in it,
really?
As well as a boot.
Yeah, what, boot, hats, shit.
I made it. I made the penguin.
Excellent.
That's my work. That's my piece of modelling there.
So viewers watching this who might buy the new Monopoly board, when they play the penguin, they know that it's yours. Yes, superb work. That must be something to be very proud of. Oh look, the Sherlock Holmes pub. Now, I do like the fact that they play old Sherlock Holmes films. They play like Basil Rathbone and stuff in the pub. Upstairs they got a recreation of what they say is Sherlock Holmes' study. Originally it was at the Festival of Britain, I think, in 1951, was that? Anyway, they had to do something with it, so they stuck it upstairs in this pub. On a hot summer's day, when there isn't a lockdown, you can come for a pint and sort of stand outside in this nice space here. It's quite a nice area.
I'll be leader, you can march behind. Come with me and see what we can find.
This is Craven Street. Notable people who lived here, Herman Melville, who wrote Moby Dick, he lived down there. This house here is Benjamin Franklin's house. It's like a museum. They'll give you a tour, and I think you can have tea or something, all in costume. And the thing about this street was this was the one where Charles Dickens based the door knocker in A Christmas Carol. You know, the door knocker turns into the face of Jacob Marley. It was because he saw some door knockers like that down here. There's quite a nice one over here. Might even have been this very door knocker. Scrooge! 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 And so Charles Dickens would have known the area very well, because when his dad was in debtor's prison down in Borough, a Marshalsea prison, he had to work as a 12-year-old in a shoe blacking factory, like putting the labels onto boot polish. Jars of boot polish, and that shoe blacking factory was down here, a place called Hungerford Stairs. Now they've got Hungerford Bridge there, and they've built Charing Cross Station, but it was originally down here, and it looked completely different. And while he was there, he met someone called Joe Fagin, who was actually quite nice to him. And how did he thank him? By naming one of his most famous villains after him. The most important thing about this street is that house at the end on the right was where my mum came to see my dad one day after work. He was working in this building over here, and he came out of the building, and then he asked her to marry him. Nice, isn't it? Right up there. Not a lot of people know that. I don't think even my sister knows it, so that'll be quite a surprise for her. You see this pub here, it's kind of unique, and it's got a pub on both sides of the street. Actually, shovel is spelt with 2 L's here. It should be shovel with 1 L. Originally it was shovel with 1 L, but then, because this is the place where the coal haulers used to come, they'd use shovels to haul coal, and I think there was an admiral or something called Sir Cloudesley Shovel, and they decided, I know, let's name it after him instead. So they added an L and called it the Ship and Shovel instead of the Ship and Shovel. Weird. Anyway, quite nice in there. I like it.
That's the place of fun and noise, all among the girls and boys, so let's all go down.
Now, all this stuff's in a different video. I just want to say where we are. We've just come down Villiers Street, which I mentioned in my last video. Gordon's is in my video about wine bars, for example. The York House Watergate is in my last video. But we're on our way through the Embankment Gardens.
Day 25 convicts sat in 25 little cells.
Through the Embankment Gardens, which I've spoken about before. I didn't mention Robbie Burns, though, so might as well just keep an eye out for Robbie Burns, the most famous Scottish poet. He wrote the words to Auld Lang Syne, pretty sure. But no one knows what it means. What is Auld Lang Syne, anyway?
Never tried it, Mr. Faulty.
As the prisoners came along, burglar Bill.
To think it was all underwater at one point.
Yes, it's amazing to think. All these, the river would have come up to here. It was the best place to live in London, along here, because behind there is the Strand. Strand means a little stretch beside the edge of the river. I want my tomb to look like this. When I die, Arthur Sullivan, half of Gilbert and Sullivan, who wrote, I am the very model of a model major general. And then someone did the periodic table to that, didn't they? You know, there's lithium, tremonium, lydium. We're just about to exit into Carting Lane, but I have already spoken about this. So to save time, I'm going to let Vintage Joolz talk about this lamp. Now, if you're anything like me, at some point in your youth, you would have attempted to light one of your farts. But at the end of the 19th century, a chap from Birmingham called Webb invented this new lamp. And this is the only one that's surviving today in London. What it did was it burnt the gases from the sewers and provided light in this dingy alleyway. Little did all the people know that their farts were providing the light for the street lamps. He had quite a lot of them made as well, and they were quite popular. Unfortunately, due to lots of smelly leaks and explosions, they ended up having to do away with them. But he sold quite a lot of them, become very rich, I think. This cast iron ornament lamp continues to burn off residual biogas. We're going to go around this little back street here, through the mountain, through the mines of Moria. You stand right here. Come on, stand over here, Simon. Do you recognise where I'm standing? Get born, keep warm, short pants, romance, learn to dance, get dressed, get blessed, try to be a success, please her, please him, buy gifts, don't. In the original Subterranean Homesick Blues video, which some people say was the first ever pop video, Bob Dylan is standing right here because he was staying at the Savoy Hotel. It was in 1965. Better jump down a manhole, light yourself a candle, don't wear sandals, try to avoid the scandals. Keep clean clothes, watch plain clothes. The pump don't work because the vandals took the handles. That little chapel is the last surviving part of the old hospital that used to be here, the Savoy Hospital. It was the first to have permanent staff actually, but in 1570 the master of the hospital, Thomas Thurland, was caught selling the beds and stealing the treasures and having sexual relations with the staff. So it wasn't that well run, the hospital. It all got knocked down, but that's the only bit that survives now. But before that, this whole area was taken up by the grandest, noblest home on the whole of the Thames. It was called Savoy Palace. That's why the Savoy tap, it's got a picture of Sir John of Gaunt. John of Gaunt is the guy in Richard II by William Shakespeare who does this earth, this realm, this England. He delivers that speech. Now he lived here in the massive palace because he was the most powerful person in the land after the king. He was instrumental in passing the poll tax laws. So it wasn't only in the 80s that they went mental about poll tax. They had the poll tax in 1381 as well, and that led to the peasants' revolts. Wat Tyler came down here with all his peasants, and he just smashed up the whole of the palace and took all John of Gaunt's stuff and chucked it in the river.
To me, sir, it's very strange. The men are tired of going round.
Savoy now, wonderful hotel, great place to go for your afternoon tea with scones, but you have to book. Now back in the 19th century, a bloke called Wolfe Joel came here to have dinner and he booked for 14 people, but someone dropped out, leaving him with an unlucky number of 13 coming to dinner. Apparently it was bad luck to be the first person to leave dinner if you're sitting down to dinner with 13 people. So old Wolfe Joel, he got up and he walked out. And anyway, 2 weeks later, he got shot in South Africa. So now, if you go there and you've got 13 guests to dinner, the Savoy will provide you with an extra guest who is this carved wooden cat called Casper the cat. And they'll give him a little serviette, they'll lay a place for him, give him a full 3-course meal as he sits down and dines with you, just so you don't have to be 13 at dinner. A lot of cockamamie ideas exist about why it is that we drive on the left in England. Some say that it's from the days when people wanted to have their sword arm free, when a gentleman would always pass someone on the left in the street so you could defend yourself in case they got a bit violent. Fortunately, there's all these useful reminders here on the road. Look right. Over here at the Savoy, we drive on the right. They say it was something to do with in the old days when people used to arrive by hansom cab. But I think it's just to confuse tourists. Oops, sorry.
It's an old tradition from the horse and carriage days. They used to come in for the theatre and they'd alight from the carriage on that side. The driver would open the carriage door behind him and they'd get off the carriage on that side and then continue the flow around this way. So they wouldn't get off the carriage and go around because it'd be too slow, it'd take too long. And then they just kept it and then it became law. It's legally you have to go on that side now. Because that was here before the hotel. See, the hotel wasn't
the
here.
Savoy Theatre, yeah. Right. You see the little roundabout at the end? The dimensions of an English taxi cab is based on whether they can go around and pick up passengers over there without performing a 3-point turn.
Designed to turn that little roundabout in the Savoy, had to get round there in one foul swoop. That's part of the criteria. It's only really this vehicle that can do it. It's better than a Mini.
Getting a bit tired, I might just turn in actually.
All right, I'll see you tomorrow night.
I'll see you. Enjoy your time at the bed and breakfast.
Thanks, Julian. Have a good night.
Let's all go down the Strand.
It's so nice when you see these old features. You have to come into a urine-stained alleyway in order to see them. But, I mean, as is traditional, we usually finish in a pub, but of course all the pubs are closed. This one, the Nell Gwyn, is named after the mistress of King Charles II that I mentioned before, who's buried in jolly old St. Martin in the Fields. Now, Nell Gwyn, she was an actress, and it's still a pub that's favoured by actors today, although it's got a very steep staircase. Take your life into your hands going down to the toilet down there. You probably don't want to hang around in here too long, not only because it smells of urine, but because it's haunted. by the ghost of William Terrace, the actor. And he was murdered coming out of the stage door of the Adelphi, which is one of these, I think. Anyway, being a typical actor, he said, "I shall return." I don't know if he said it like that. "I shall return, darlings." And indeed he did return by haunting this alleyway and also Covent Garden Station. That's another parish boundary marker. So presumably, this is the parish of St Paul's, Covent Garden. The big church in the centre where everyone does the street entertainment is St Paul's, Covent Garden. I shall return. I shall return.
A noise all among the girls and boys, so let's all go down the Strand.
Oh well, thanks for watching everybody. Unfortunately all the pubs are closed, so I can't do my traditional ending in a pub, but oh look, someone has conveniently left this bottle here. So I'll say cheers, socially distanced cheers, Simon. Let's keep away, boy. Cheers, and thanks everybody. If you enjoy the videos, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and you can head over to my website, joolzguides.com, where you can find out more about me and all sorts of stuff, buy weird merchandise, and also sign up to the Instagram at Joolz Guides and all that stuff. But anyway, above all, be thoroughly delightful to yourselves. See you next time, folks.
That's the place for fun and noise,
Yes,
all among the girls and boys, so let's all go down the Strand.